surrendered unto you, please impart full knowledge in this connection. Translation, please repeat. O great sage,
O great sage,
representative of the Lord,
representative of the Lord,
kindly satisfy my inquisitiveness
kindly satisfy my inquisitiveness
in all that I have inquired
in all that I have inquired
from
from you,
you, in all that I may not have inquired from
and
you.
all that I may not have inquired from you.
From the very beginning of my questioning,
From the very beginning of my questioning,
since I am a soul surrendered unto you,
since my soul surrendered unto you,
please impart full knowledge in this connection.
please impart full knowledge in this connection.
Okay, in case we didn't get it all there for the YouTube audience. O great sage, representative of the Lord, kindly satisfy my inquisitiveness in all that I have inquired from you, in all that I may not have inquired from you from the very beginning of my questionings. Since I am a soul surrendered unto you, please impart full knowledge in this connection. Srila Prabhupada's divine purport. The spiritual master is always prepared to impart knowledge to the disciple, and specifically when the disciple is very inquisitive. Inquisitiveness on the part of a disciple is greatly necessary for the progressive disciple. Maharaj Pritchett is a typical disciple because he is perfectly inquisitive. If one is not very inquisitive about self-realization, one need not approach a spiritual master simply to make a show of discipleship. Not only is Maharaj Pritchett inquisitive concerning all that he has inquired about, but he is also anxious to know about what he has not been able to inquire. Factually, it is not possible for a man to inquire about everything from the spiritual master, but the bona fide spiritual master is able to enlighten the disciple in every way for the disciple's benefit. But the bona fide spiritual master is able to enlighten the disciple in every way for the disciple's benefit. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. Srila Prabhupada Ki. I offer my respectful and humble obeisances unto my spiritual master who has opened my eyes, although they were shut by darkness. When Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within the material world the desire to fulfill the desire of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, give me shelter at his lotus feet. So this verse is this inquisitiveness Krishna also mentions in Bhagavad Gita, and one of his more famous verses, the 34th verse of the 4th chapter. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te dhyanam jnaninas takadashinaha. Upadekshanti, by submissive inquiries. No, that's pariprashnena. Let's see, where's that inquisitiveness? Oh yeah, right here. That's it. Pariprashnena, by submissive inquiries. And so here Krishna gives a couple of qualifications that's not mentioned here. Here in this sloka there's an emphasis put on the disciple being inquisitive. And that makes one bona fide. Whereas if we're not inquisitive, then Prabhupada mentions in the purport, there's really no need to make a show of some sort of discipleship. And the disciple is meant to be inquisitive. He should be trying to figure out his situation and trying to solve whatever dilemmas, predicaments, trying to solve the problem of being attached to that which is causing him pain, that which is keeping him in the cycle of pain. The disciple is meant to be inquisitive about all that. Here, Sukadeva Goswami says, because I am a soul surrendered unto you. And here Krishna does mention this specific qualification, I am a soul surrendered unto you. Krishna calls it submissiveness, or at least we translate it like that, pariprashnena, by submissive inquiries. I am a soul surrendered unto you. Please impart full knowledge in this connection. So in Srila Prabhupada's purport to this 34th verse, 4th chapter, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. These self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So, the spiritual master, he can impart that knowledge that the disciple needs for his benefit. And we should take the opportunity to inquire as much as possible. In other places, Srila Prabhupada mentions that we should not make absurd inquiries, like ridiculous things, or things that are sort of childish, or maybe they're important to us and they may seem childish, and one can test the spiritual master and find out whether he thinks it's important or not. The spiritual master understands the trials and tribulations. He probably has a lot of practical experience about them, and he can benefit the disciple. Srila Prabhupada has mentioned that a really intelligent person, he can learn simply by hearing. Less intelligent one, he has to actually see the thing that he's hearing about to really understand it. Spiritual master may say this world is full of pain, and one disciple may understand that practically, whereas another disciple, he may have to see the pain. Perhaps he doesn't remember the pain, or he can't really, for whatever reason, grasp what he means by that. Perhaps he just really feels good all the time. But then if he sees the pain, then he can understand. And the foolish disciple, they can really never understand. They can't, even if they see it. But actually there's three. One has to experience the pain. When you experience the pain, then you say, oh, that's what he meant. But the foolish person, they can experience it, they can see it, they can hear about it, and they still can't understand it. When you tell them, oh, this material world is a miserable place, they can't understand that because of foolishness. They're just too absorbed in foolishness. That's the unfortunate situation for people when they get a little bit of money, a little bit of power. Then, they can't understand anything concerning the pain of this material world, because it all looks like a very enjoyable place for them. You take that away, and if that's all they know about, or if they've had too big of a taste of that, then they become depressed. Otherwise, we see that there have been cultures not based on having a lot of money having a lot of power, but simply having a community of people with a culture or heritage of spirituality and goodness, and being able to live together and work the land and live in harmony with nature and eat whatever they produce, worship God according to their means. And it's actually, there's documentation of it that these people were very happy. And there's further documentation that as soon as modern civilization entered into their village and into their land and gave them all the great modern amenities, made them walk around and see people with fancy jeans and video machines and make them feel sort of stupid for not knowing or really enjoying these things. Then within a few years' time, all these people were depressed. They were depressed just trying to chase after all this capital. That's the gold of our capitalistic civilizations, that we produce things that people become addicted to and think they need to enjoy. And we've destroyed indigenous civilizations all over the world by doing so. And we're practically, when I say we, I mean our big white supremacist imperialistic nations that have traveled the world putting down their flags and even claimed they have put it on the moon and claimed it for themselves and didn't care a fig for the people that lived there other than to exploit them for their benefit and completely deride whatever heritage they had. This went on in the name of sometimes even religion. Certainly went on in the name of political might. Anyway, that has, whoever it be, the capitalistic person or the person who's become, habituated to their means of enjoyment, or the person who somehow ever is hanging on to their heritage, if by good fortune they all come in contact with a bona fide spiritual master who may be white, black, or yellow, they may be, from this heritage or that heritage, but by the arrangement of providence, by God's mercy, they've become what is commonly called in our English language self-realized. Then they can actually help that person. They can help that person understand that really, in this material world, it's insignificant. All these attachments are not important at all. They're completely temporary. What's really important is to understand yourself beyond this body and mind. That person that's eternal, that is you. That is me. That is civilization. That's real civilization, when people are trained to learn like that, to understand their spiritual self, and not to think that the material self is me, and to inject within its veins things to enjoy that keep the real self in darkness. We become simply habituated to playing in this world, and we take birth after birth to be the king, the champion, the winner, to gain all sorts of prestige, adoration, distinction, profit, fame. People just chase it. But yet none of it is real. It is all temporary. That very person that we thought was somebody is, soon hauled off to the cemetery and either cremated or buried. And in a few years' time, people have forgotten all about them and they're following somebody else. The knowledge that's taught in Srila Prabhupada's books is real knowledge of the self. And it brings us to that thing called enlightenment. That enlightenment is simply understanding ourselves to be an eternal being in relationship to everything else that's eternal, which is actually everything. And we're related to all of it. Just like in this world we're related. We have some relation with everything. Even if we think that thing or that person is an enemy, or that thing is not good for us, then we still have a relationship. It may not seem to be the best relationship, but it's a relationship. So we're related to things. That's our nature, to be related. It's Krishna's nature to also be related, but he's related is our very source. He's the source of everything. He's the real owner of everything. And we're given some things by providence, by God, ultimately by Krishna. He gives us some things. And if we simply misuse those, then, that is our failure. And hopefully we can learn from it. That when providence gives us something, it is meant to be used properly. That's the type of things we can inquire about from the spiritual master. What am I meant to do with this? I have this desire, that desire. How am I meant to utilize it properly? What am I to do about it? I have this inclination and that inclination. Is that good for me? Is that bad for me? What do you see in me? What do you think I should be doing? I've learned like this and I've done like that. I met you, but these are things that I've been able to accumulate in my life. This is the type of education I have. This is the type of possessions that I have. What am I to do with it all? How am I meant to utilize it for you? We should trust the spiritual master. I trust you. I know that you know what is best to do with these things. I know you know what is best for me to do with the body and the mind that I have inherited. How can I employ it in Krishna's service? Spiritual master knows all these things. And he can tell the disciple. Whereas if a disciple or a student, they simply ignore the spiritual master and they simply want to enjoy whatever they have themselves. I know how to utilize it for Krishna. I will utilize it for Krishna. Spiritual master is just going to take it away. He's going to want my money. That disciple can't make as much advancement as the disciple that, like Maharaj Parikshit, since I am a soul surrendered unto you, please impart full knowledge in this connection of my inquiries. Because he's surrendered. If we're not surrendered, then we just can't expect as much. The spirit, just like people in the ordinary world have certain obligations, the spiritual master has a natural inclination or obligation. He feels a natural obligation to the soul surrendered to him. He's ready to bend over backwards to help that person. Because that person is bending over backwards trying to help him. There's the famous example is that of Madhavendra Puri and his disciple Puri Maharaj, the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He took care of the spiritual master at the end of his worldly life, which was always used in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, far beyond what ordinary human beings could possibly understand. But like an ordinary human being, his body suffered from loss of control of his bowel movements, things like that. And Puri Maharaj stayed with the spiritual master and kept him clean. Whereas another disciple ignored that and tried to instruct the spiritual master. Couldn't understand why he was crying for Krishna. He thought this was just sentimental. He had never understood bhakti. He failed to understand bhakti. Instead, he thought he was very smart because he was absorbed in some sort of jnana or knowledge of the self being eternal and the body being temporary. And he thought the spiritual master was acting like an ordinary person who has some sentiments for things in this world and is lamenting about losing them. That type of disciple failed the real spiritual master. And instead of getting his blessings, he received the opposite. Whereas Puri Maharaj, he was blessed. And to the extent that he became the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Lord Chaitanya, he, by taking initiation from Puri Maharaj, he became a devotee. Whereas previously, the Lord was enjoying other pastimes. He was enjoying pastimes as a scholar or a brahmana. And that was his worldly pursuit. That was his pursuit in life. That, he was the best. Krishna is always the best. Purushottama. He's the best. There's no better person. So when Krishna appears among scholars, he's the best scholar. Even at a young age, all the other scholars, they feared him and they were in awe of him. Because no one could compete with him in debate. That's the sport of scholars. They enjoy a good debate. But Lord Chaitanya, he could diminish the scholastics of any great disciplinarian that he came in contact with. In public, Lord Chaitanya was fearless. He was the topmost scholar. The famous incident, of course, is the Digvijay, the scholar who claimed to be the best scholar in all the world and took great pleasure in engaging other scholars in debate and defeating them. He was able to do this in most of the big popular holy places throughout India and all the places of scholarship. But when he came to Navadvip and all the scholars were so fearful, they thought, now the Digvijay has come here and he's going to diminish our fame because none of us can stand up to him. He is the recipient of the blessings of Goddess Saraswati herself. And as soon as he begins to speak, the Goddess appears on his tongue. And she speaks directly through him. So consequently, no human being could even begin to understand the power and beauty of his language. He was so great and powerful. But that very scholar, as soon as he saw Nimai Pandit sitting amongst his students on the banks of the Ganga as the moon was rising, he looked so beautiful. All he could think was, who is this person? And immediately fear and awe entered his mind, something that he wasn't used to. Instead, it was always the opposite for him. Others always felt awe and fear seeing him because he was so great. And seeing Nimai Pandit, immediately some fear and awe entered his mind. Still, he inquired, Who is this person? And immediately, one of Nimai's students says, this is the famous Nimai Pandit. So he moved a little closer. And immediately Nimai, as soon as he recognized him, he immediately called him and gave him a seat and inquired for him. Spoke nice words to him. And then asked him to compose poetry in glorification of Mother Ganga. And his poetry was so great, and it was so miraculously recited or pronounced spontaneously, on the spot, composed, 100 or more, couplets or verses glorifying the Ganga, an hour's worth of pronouncing them, reciting it before all of Nimai's students and all the people that had gathered there. And people were just astounded by the beauty of it all. That they were sitting with their mouths open, thinking that this is not humanly possible. And certainly he is the recipient of the goddess of learning, Mother Saraswati. And when he finishes, Nimai praises him. And he asks him, please explain it, because most of us can't even understand it. And as he begins to explain, Nimai says, but wait, why, according to grammar, you have made these mistakes in this beautiful recitation? In the beginning, the middle, and the end, you have made these mistakes. Can you please explain? So most people couldn't even understand it, with the speak of memorizing it. Nimai asked him, what is the mistake here? In the beginning, he tells him the verse that he recited. He does the same for the middle and the same at the end. He says, please explain to us. And as he tries to explain, then Nimai finds the fault in the explanation. No, it can't be like that. And he tells him why. And this goes on until he becomes so fatigued that he can no longer speak. And Nimai said, don't worry about it. Just don't worry. You've recited so much. Just compose something else. And we'll talk about that. But he became so bewildered at this time that the great Digvijay could no longer compose a single verse of poetry. And all he could think was, why has this happened to me? Why has the goddess abandoned me at this time? Why is it that I've been humiliated by a teacher of grammar to boys? And so, but Nimai is very kind to him. When all the students start to snicker and laugh, everybody sees that the Digvijay has been defeated. And they start to want to, jump up like people do in celebration. Nimai composes everybody. No, please, And he makes as he's done so many times in the past, he makes the scholar feel good about himself, and as he has so many times said, he tells him, please go home and take some rest. Examine your books, come back tomorrow, and we can talk some more. And so they all gradually depart, and the Pandit is just left sitting there frozen, doesn't know why this has happened to him like this. And gradually he falls asleep. And in his sleep, the goddess comes to him and explains that I have abandoned you because the real benediction of having come in touch with me, you have now received. You thought that the benediction of being in touch with me was your vast learning. But in actuality, today, you have received the real benediction. Because that that young Pandit who defeated you is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. And I had to leave because I'm embarrassed to stand before Him. So you should now go to Him and surrender to Him, because this is the real benediction that I am able to offer. So as soon as his dream broke and he woke up, immediately he ran to Nimai. And Nimai looks at him and says, Why have you come so early in the morning like this? What are you doing here? And he says, I have come to surrender to you. I know who you are. He explains to him his dream and surrenders to him. The goddess informed him that he was not to tell anyone this. And Nimai also told him that you should not tell anyone this. It will not be good for you. But the scholar inquires from Nimai about how he had become falsely attached to so many wonderful material things, and that all of it was simply bondage, holding him down to this world. And now he realized with the actual goal of knowledge is to come in contact with the Supreme and to become an unalloyed devotee, a devotee ready to serve Krishna at every moment and help other people out of the jam of material attachment. And in a moment's time, by touch with Nimai, he gave up all of his possessions, which consisted of many elephants and horses and servants and people, and so much distinction and honor and all these things. He just tossed them aside like nothing and began to travel simply in a loincloth, practically speaking, chanting the glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the glory of the science of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, rather than all sorts of knowledge of composition and Sanskrit grammar and the 6 various Vedic philosophies and all else that scholars speak about and know about. So those sort of inquiries need to be made from the spiritual master, and by doing so, the disciple can greatly benefit. Whereas, if we ignore to inquire from him, then, what will be our benefit? Or if we challenge him, what will be our benefit? We haven't even recognized. What the importance of the spiritual master is. We may be judging him like an ordinary mortal, an ordinary person. This is, he's like, he's not as great as so-and-so at this school or that school. His articulation isn't really so wonderful. He can't really sing like the last person who was on the one of those shows, who somehow ever passed all the judges and everybody ultimately set off the fireworks for. He doesn't sing as nice as that person. And, what is all this dancing? I see much better, what do they call it when they have that thing when they teach people to dance? Choreography, yeah. I don't see all that here with this devotional type of dancing. A person may think like that in mundane ways. Just another attachment. We think the king, we think the politicians, the tax collectors, the rich people, we think they're attached. What about the scholars who walk around in the so-called mode of goodness? How attached they are to their scholarship. They're not ready to give up, one little space in their institutional positions or their worldly recognition. You know, they're ready to sell their wares to whoever can come up with the most money, which actually only equates them to be no better than a Sudra or a wage worker. They're all wage workers. Whoever can pay them the most money, they work for. They're no better than a wage worker, practically speaking. They can just demand more because they use it to keep people attached in this material world. No one wants to listen to the person who tells us how to get free from the material world. That won't involve money, it will involve austerity. And if I have money, or if I know how to make money, it means I have to make it for the spiritual master and Krishna, not for my sense enjoyment. No one wants that. So that's actually how it was here. None of us were great scholars who helped build New Talavana in New Orleans. It seemed like, you know, all we were was some American kids with a capitalistic spirit, you know, that ran through our blood. So all we could do was earn money. So that's how we paid for New Talavana. You know, nobody cared to listen to our ministry. I mean, we were like the laughing stock of New Orleans and southern Mississippi. Every Baptist minister would, you know, just poke fun at us. I remember the temple president, he sent this newspaper around to all the locals condemning cow slaughter. And we got so many calls, threatening calls. And I remember one time me and Dwi Buja went to buy hay for the cows for the winter. We didn't have enough hay. We were trying to buy a cow, trying to buy hay for the cows. Went to this one foreman's place, and in that same newspaper he was condemning tractors. So we went there, and the man looks at us, and we tell him we want to buy some hay, and he goes, "Nope." He's one country guy. But you know, you say you got it for sale. He said, "Nope." Had to use a tractor to make that hay. No, you don't want my hay. Guy actually told us like that, you know.
You should move must have got mad.
Anyways, but we could make some money. You know, we sold so much spiritual sky incense with Krishna on the package. Like we were in competition with every big incense company in America, practically speaking. We were selling it everywhere. And that's how we earned the money to, you know, initially buying the Talavana. Eventually, we had to finish paying for it with selling other things. Just like what we wouldn't even have the playground for the kids and the bathrooms and the sidewalks if it wasn't for Joy selling all kinds of semi-precious stones in New Orleans. so you know, sometimes more important things, you know, come from parts of the society that are considered less. We always want to just praise the head, or we always want to just praise the arms. But it may be the belly that's producing, you know, or it may be the legs that's getting things done. Like what would be getting done in the garden if everybody wasn't moving and working out there, you know? So in our Daiva Varnashram, the devotees, they can do all sorts of things, whatever is needed for the Lord, at the time that it's needed, and accomplish it. Or they can do the opposite of that and just maintain the deity worship despite everybody leaving, because they're just so committed to a Brahminical activity and they see the importance of it. Nobody else may even see the importance of it. It's not making money. I mean, what is it doing? People are trying to break in and, you know, all they're doing is waving incense to their idols. That's the way people will think about it. But somebody else we'll see completely different. I mean, who would have ever thought that Srila Prabhupada sending his students, his disciples, out with, homemade carvings of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra on an old flatbed truck, where it had never been done any place else in the world, practically speaking, except for people in India usually pulling the kids' cart, because the real Jagannath parade, the biggest parade in the whole world, was monopolized everything concerning Lord Jagannath. And here's Srila Prabhupada sending out homemade deities of Lord Jagannath on a flatbed truck in a big capitalistic American city. And that it was the beginning of what would one day become, those same people becoming actually committed disciples, putting in years and years of blood, sweat, and tears to serve him. Who would have ever figured in 1967 that these people taking out these homemade carvings of these Indian deities on a flatbed truck it would all go on to become, a miraculous parade in an American city, all over, big cities, all over the world. Nobody would have ever figured something like that. But, that's the potency of the spiritual master. I mean, he never discouraged people from worshiping the deities. He never discouraged people from marrying and living Krishna consciously. He never discouraged people from distributing books. I mean, he even told the devotees in New Vrindavan, when they said they didn't have time to study Bhagavad Gita because they were having to work so hard growing food, etc., he told them that they were living Bhagavad Gita. How does Krishna say that? Goraksha and how's the agricultural person called? Krisha?
Krishi Goraksha.
Yeah, Krishi Goraksha.
Is the agriculture and Goraksha.
Yeah, so Goraksha is cow protection and Krishi is agriculture. All right, we better stop this past time. Thank you all for whatever you're doing there. Thank you, Maharani. You're supposed to be snapping beans. Are you snapping beans? No, you're doing something else, huh?
Turmeric.
One of the few things, the Boga market's back up price-wise, just like it was before. So, I mean, whatever they're saying about New Orleans and shut down this and that, this is what only restaurants buy, which all closed down. All their prices are high, people in there buying, and they're all just catering to people, either delivering or people coming to pick up.
You're talking about restaurant people?
Yeah, in New Orleans. So everything was expensive, but we managed to get some really fresh snap beans at a pretty good price. And
You think it would be down because gas prices are so low? I think the price of things would go down.
well, I mean, it wasn't. It was just like the prices were before COVID-19. It wasn't like everything just shot beyond it. It was like pre-COVID-19 prices. But the last time we went is when all the lockdown was started. It was like really bad in New Orleans, and they were selling it all out cheap before they restocked. And we really scooped up on that. But this time it was high, and we could only get snap beans. And what else was it good? There was one other thing.
Corn.
Corn. We got corn at a fairly good price.
I think the Walmart produce prices have gone down a little bit.
We couldn't get no cauliflower, though. That was up.
Well, it was actually not as up as it was before the thing, but it wasn't low enough to make me want to buy it.